Let's take a journey, not through space but through time. I want you to truly try and transport yourself. Let the sounds of your world fade away. Let go of the electric hum of your refrigerator, the glow of your screen, the persistent traffic outside your window. We are traveling back in time to a moment when the 20th century was just dawning, a time of steam and steel and burgeoning modernity. But our story's roots go far, far deeper, into a past so remote it feels like another world entirely. Picture the deep, dark, sapphire blue of the Aegean Sea. The year is 1900. It is the week of Easter, a time of renewal and hope. A small wooden boat, a type of vessel known as a capodico, cuts through the waves. On board is a crew of Greek sponge divers from the beautiful, sun-drenched island of Symi. They are led by their captain, a seasoned seaman named Demetrius Contis. They are heading home after a long, arduous season harvesting the valuable sea sponges off the coast of North Africa. We need to pause here and understand what their life was like. This was a brutal, incredibly dangerous line of work. These divers were the astronauts of their day, descending into a hostile, alien world with the most primitive of equipment. Their gear was not the sleek scuba apparatus we know today. It consisted of a heavy canvas suit that offered little protection from the crushing cold of the depths. A massive, bell-like copper helmet was lowered over their heads and bolted into place, sealing them in. Their only connection to the world of air and light was a simple rubber hose, fed by a hand-cranked air pump on the boat above, worked tirelessly by their crewmates. Their boots were weighted with heavy plates of lead to drag them down to the seafloor. It was a life of constant risk for a meager reward. They faced the ever-present threat of equipment failure, of tangled airlines, and of the mysterious and terrifying condition they called diver's disease, what we now know as decompression sickness or the bends, which could cripple or kill a man with agonizing pain. Now, weary and weather-beaten after months of this punishing labor, they are dreaming of home, of their families, of the simple pleasure of solid ground beneath their feet. But the Mediterranean, for all its beauty, is a fickle and often cruel master. Without warning, a violent storm erupts, a furious, shrieking tempest that turns the sea from a placid blue into a churning cauldron of black water and white foam. Their small boat is tossed about like a leaf in a hurricane. Their sails are ripped to shreds. Their course is utterly lost. They are blown helplessly across the sea for days, at the complete mercy of the wind and waves. After what must have felt like an eternity of terror, they find themselves seeking shelter in the lee of a small, rocky, and largely insignificant island. A jagged limestone rock jutting out of the sea, caught between the great island of Crete to the south and the Greek mainland, the Peloponnese to the north. Its name was Antikythera. As the storm finally rages itself out, the crew takes stock. They are alive, but their supplies are running dangerously low. Their profitable season has been cut disastrously short. To make up for the lost time and hopefully salvage their voyage financially, Captain Contis makes a fateful decision. They will dive here, in these unfamiliar, uncharted waters. It's a gamble, but they are desperate men. A young diver named Elias Stadiatos prepares for the descent. The crew helps him into the heavy canvas suit. The massive copper helmet is lowered over his head, the world outside becoming a muffled, distant hum. The front glass plate is screwed tight. He steps to the edge of the boat, takes a breath of the pumped air that already tastes stale, and with a splash, he is gone, surrendering himself to the deep. He sinks down, 10 meters, 20. The world of brilliant sunlight fades to a murky green, then a deep twilight blue. 40 meters, 50. Down here, at a depth of nearly 150 feet, the pressure is immense, a crushing physical weight on the body. The cold of the deep sea seeps through the canvas suit and into your bones. It is a place of profound silence and almost total isolation. He's scanning the seafloor, his eyes straining in the gloom for the brownish, lumpy shapes of sponges. But he finds something else. Something that does not belong here in this natural undersea world. A glint of white in the gloom, then another. He moves closer, his heavy leaden boots shuffling ponderously on the seabed. And then he sees them, a horrifying, chaotic heap of rotting corpses. The pale, naked forms of men and women, scattered across the seafloor, their ghostly white limbs reaching out from the silt. One shape looks like a horse, its body bloated and decaying. Pure, primal terror grips him. He imagines a shipwreck, a recent one, a massacre. He signals frantically on his lifeline, pulling the series of emergency tugs that mean pull me up, now. He is hauled to the surface, breaking through into the blinding sunlight like a creature reborn. The crew quickly unbolts the heavy helmet. Stadiatos' face is ashen, his eyes wide with a terror that is not faked. He babbles, almost incoherently, about what he saw down below. A graveyard, a massacre of naked people on the seabed. The captain, Demetrius Contis, is a practical, hard-bitten man. He's seen what the pressure does to a man's mind. He assumes Stadiatos has fallen victim to nitrogen narcosis, the rapture of the deep, a dangerous state of mental intoxication that can cause powerful, vivid hallucinations. To prove the young man wrong, and perhaps to calm his now terrified crew, Captain Contis decides to go down himself. He is the captain, he must show courage. He dons the heavy gear, takes a deep breath of the pumped air, and descends to the same spot. When he returns to the surface minutes later and his helmet is removed, his expression is not one of scorn, but of pure, unadulterated awe. Stadiatos was right and he was profoundly wrong. What they had found was not a graveyard of bodies. It was a graveyard of art. The corpses were brilliant white marble statues, their forms made ghostly by the deep water. The rotting flesh was the green patina of ancient bronze. The horse was a magnificent bronze sculpture, part of a larger group. They had stumbled upon one of the greatest archaeological wonders of the century. They had found a Roman-era cargo ship, a treasure vessel that had sunk around 65 BC, its priceless cargo perfectly preserved in its deep, dark, watery tomb. What followed was the world's first major underwater archaeological excavation. It was a heroic and tragic endeavor. For nearly a year, these same sponge divers, now working with the Hellenic Navy and government archaeologists, risked their lives daily. They battled the crushing pressure, the constant risk of the bends, the disorienting darkness. They had no submersibles, no robotic arms. Every single artifact had to be found, carefully dislodged from the seabed, and tied with ropes to be hauled to the surface by hand. The human cost was immense. One diver, Georgios Kritikis, died from a catastrophic case of decompression sickness. 2 others, including the captain's own brother, were left permanently paralyzed from the neck down. They were giving their health, and even their lives, to bring the ship's treasures into the light. And what treasures they were! They recovered stunning bronze statues, including the magnificent, world-famous life-sized figure, now known as the Antikythera Youth, a masterpiece of Hellenistic art. They brought up the stoic, bearded head of a philosopher, his bronze eyes seeming to hold the wisdom of the ages. They found exquisite glassware, intricate gold jewelry, beautiful ceramic amphorae still containing traces of wine and oil, and massive, beautifully carved marble sculptures. These artifacts filled the halls of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, a stunning testament to the lost riches of the ancient world. Amidst all this splendor, this breathtaking hoard of classical art, they also brought up a lump, a greenish, corroded, calcified lump of bronze and rotted wood, about the size of a large book or a modern laptop. It was unassuming, ugly. It looked like a piece of rock that had fused with some wreckage. It was given a cursory look, catalogued, and then, for all intents and purposes, forgotten. It sat on a shelf in the museum's storeroom, a disregarded, ugly footnote to the glorious statues it was found with. No one could have possibly known that this single ugly lump was infinitely more valuable, more significant, more paradigm-shattering than all the other treasures combined. No one could have guessed that this corroded mass held a secret that would fundamentally rewrite our understanding of the ancient world and challenge our very concept of historical and technological progress. Because 2 years later, on May 17, 1902, the lump, slowly drying out in the warm air of the museum, cracked open under its own internal stresses. An archaeologist named Valerio Stays, who was examining the pottery from the wreck, happened to glance at it. Peering inside the freshly opened fissure, he saw something impossible. Gears. Not crude, simple cogs like you might find in a Roman watermill. He saw a complex assembly of precisely interlocking, triangular-toothed gear wheels, layered on top of each other. He saw plates with finely inscribed circular scales. It was a machine of a complexity that, according to every history book ever written, simply could not exist in the 1st century BC. This was the moment the true mystery began. This was the discovery of what we now call the Antikythera mechanism. It is, without exaggeration, the most sophisticated piece of ancient technology ever found. An artifact so advanced, so far beyond its time, that for decades it was considered the ultimate out-of-place artifact. So tonight, we are going to unravel the long and complex story of this impossible object. We will explore how this corroded lump of bronze went from a museum curiosity to being called the world's first analog computer. We will dive into the high-tech forensic work that has slowly revealed its secrets, and we will confront the profound and unsettling questions it raises about our own past. What was this device? Who could have built it? And most importantly, what does its existence tell us about the lost knowledge of our ancestors? Welcome, fellow explorers of the unknown. Let's decode the ghost in the machine. After Valerio Stays made his shocking discovery, you might think the academic world would be set ablaze with excitement and wonder, that the headlines would scream, "Ancient Greek robot found." They didn't. In fact, his announcement was met with a resounding thud of indifference and, in many cases, outright scorn from the archaeological and historical establishment. To understand why, you have to understand the prevailing wisdom of the early 20th century. The accepted narrative of history was that the Greek miracle was a purely intellectual one. The ancient Greeks were brilliant philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, mathematicians like Euclid and Pythagoras, dramatists like Sophocles and Euripides, and architects of sublime genius who gave us the Parthenon. They were thinkers, not tinkerers. The world of complex, practical machinery, that was the domain of the Romans with their aqueducts, cranes, and siege engines. And the world of fine, intricate, clockwork-like mechanics, that was believed to be a much later invention, born in the workshops of the great cathedral clockmakers of 14th century Europe, more than 1,000 years later. The common belief was that the Greeks used gears, yes, but only in large, crude, powerful applications, lifting heavy stones for their temples, grinding grain in watermills as described by engineers like Hero of Alexandria. The concept of using small, finely wrought gears with precisely calculated tooth counts to model complex mathematical or astronomical cycles was considered wildly anachronistic, a historical impossibility. Most scholars who bothered to look at the lump concluded that it must be a later object that had somehow fallen onto the wreck site by coincidence. Perhaps it was a modern navigational tool like a sextant dropped by a passing ship, or maybe an early mechanical clock from the Renaissance. The idea that it was contemporaneous with the 2,000-year-old statues was dismissed as ludicrous. Stasis claims were largely ignored, and the mechanism went back to being a quiet, dusty, and slightly embarrassing enigma in the museum's basement. It would take more than half a century for someone to take the mystery seriously again. That someone was Derek de Solla Price, a British historian of science at Yale University. Price was a brilliant, tenacious, and somewhat maverick thinker, a man who wasn't afraid to challenge established dogma. In the 1950s, he came across the mechanism and became utterly obsessed. He saw what others had missed or refused to see. This was no simple machine. This was something profound. For the next 20 years, Price dedicated himself to cracking its code. The task was monumental. The mechanism was in a terrible state. It wasn't one piece, but had broken into 82 separate, corroded, and incredibly fragile fragments. Many were just flakes of bronze, crumbling at the touch. It was like trying to solve the world's most complex three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, with most of the pieces missing, the rest turning to dust, and no picture on the box to guide you. Price used the most advanced technology of his day, gamma rays and X-rays. This was not the high-resolution imaging we have today. These were fuzzy, two-dimensional shadowgraphs. He would place a fragment on a photographic plate and bombard it with radiation, hoping to reveal the denser shapes of the gears hidden within the less dense corrosion. He spent countless hours in a darkroom, staring at the faint, shadowy images, painstakingly counting the teeth on the ghostly outlines of gears, trying to deduce their ratios and how they might have fit together. It was a slow, agonizing process of intellectual archaeology, filled with dead ends and false starts. Finally, in 1974, he published a groundbreaking 70-page paper. He didn't bury it in an obscure academic journal. He took his case directly to the public in Scientific American. The title was a bold, unambiguous declaration: an ancient Greek computer. It was a bombshell. In the paper, Price laid out his theory, the fruit of 2 decades of relentless detective work. He argued that the Antikythera mechanism was not a clock. It was a mechanical cosmos, a complex, geared astronomical calculator. He proposed that the front of the device, which was mostly missing, had a large dial with at least 2 concentric rings. One ring marked the 365 days of the Egyptian solar calendar, the standard, unchanging calendar used by ancient astronomers, because it didn't have the messy complication of leap years. The other ring marked the 12 signs of the zodiac, the celestial highway through which the sun, moon, and planets appear to travel. He theorized that a series of pointers on this dial, all driven by a complex system of internal gears, would have shown the precise position of the sun and the moon in the sky on any given day. By turning a knob on the side, you could move time forward or backward, and the pointers would elegantly track to their correct astronomical positions. But the back of the device, which was better preserved, was where the true genius lay. Price had identified 2 large, beautiful spiral-shaped dials. After immense effort, he figured out what they were for. The upper dial, he argued, was a 235-month calendar computer that tracked the Metonic cycle. This is a crucial 19-year cycle that ancient astronomers discovered, which ingeniously reconciles the solar year, the time it takes Earth to orbit the Sun, about 365.25 days, with the lunar month, the time it takes the Moon to orbit the Earth, about 29.5 days. These 2 cycles don't mesh neatly, which is a huge headache if your calendar is based on the Moon, like the Greek civic calendars were. The Metonic cycle was the elegant mathematical solution, and this dial was its physical embodiment. The lower dial, he claimed, tracked something even more amazing: the Saros cycle. This is a cycle of 223 lunar months, or about 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Its importance? It can be used to predict eclipses, both solar and lunar, with remarkable accuracy. An eclipse that happens today will be followed by a very similar eclipse 1 Saros cycle later. Let that sink in for a moment. Derek de Soliprice was claiming that a device, built 2 centuries before the birth of Christ, was a portable, hand-cranked, mechanical computer that could predict the future, could tell you the phase of the moon, could tell you the position of the sun, and most astonishingly, it could tell you when the sun or moon would vanish from the sky in a dramatic, often terrifying, eclipse. This was a level of mechanical genius and theoretical understanding that, according to the entire accepted history of science, was more than 1,400 years ahead of its time. It was like finding a fully functional jet engine in a pharaoh's tomb. Price's work was brilliant, a tour de force of scholarship. But it was also met with considerable skepticism. His model required gears with very specific and sometimes odd numbers of teeth, like 127 or 223, numbers that seemed arbitrary to some. And he had to infer the existence of an entire system of planetary gears in a central, missing part of the mechanism to make his whole theory work. Many in the academic community still found it too incredible to believe. The idea of this singular, miraculous piece of ancient technology was just too much. It was a beautiful theory, they said, but it was still just a theory, a brilliant piece of speculation. The out-of-place artifact remained controversial, a tantalizing but unproven hypothesis. And that's where things stood for decades. The mystery deepened, but a final, definitive answer remained locked away inside those crumbling, corroded bronze fragments. It would take a new century, and a new generation of technology far beyond what Price could have conceived, to finally prove him right and to reveal that the reality was even more incredible than he had ever dared to imagine. The next great chapter in our story begins in the early 2000s. The age of modern computing had arrived, and with it, new tools that could perform digital miracles. A new international consortium was formed, called the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, or AMRP. It was a dream team of experts: astronomers, mathematicians, physicists, classicists, and imaging specialists from the UK, Greece, and the United States, led by figures like Professor Mike Edmonds and Tony Freeth. Their mission was to use 21st century technology to conduct a full forensic analysis of this ancient mystery, to finally settle the debate once and for all. They brought in the heavy artillery. A British company called X-Tech Systems developed a massive, custom-built, 8-ton machine specifically for this project, which they called the Blade Runner. It used cutting-edge microfocus X-ray computed tomography, or CT scanning. Essentially, it was a superpowered medical scanner capable of taking thousands of high-resolution 3D X-ray slices of the fragile fragments. For the first time, researchers could see inside the mechanism in stunning three-dimensional detail, without ever having to physically touch or risk damaging the priceless artifacts. They could digitally fly through the gear trains and see how they meshed. They also used a revolutionary imaging technique developed by HP Labs called polynomial texture mapping, or PTM. This method involves taking hundreds of digital photographs of an object's surface, each with the light source in a slightly different position. A powerful computer then combines these images to create a virtual surface that can be manipulated and lit from any angle on a computer screen. This was crucial for reading the faint, almost invisible inscriptions that covered the device's outer surfaces. Inscriptions that were completely illegible to the naked eye. It was like having a magical digital magnifying glass. For weeks, in the basement of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, the team worked around the clock, carefully scanning each of the 82 fragments. The data they collected was immense, terabytes of it. They then spent years painstakingly analyzing these new 3D images and virtual surfaces. And what they found was breathtaking. First, they confirmed that Derek de Soliprice was, in almost every respect, absolutely correct. His brilliant, lonely deductions, made with primitive X-rays and sheer intellectual force, were vindicated. The CT scans revealed the gears he had predicted, with the exact, strange tooth counts he had proposed. The front dial did indeed show the zodiac and the Egyptian calendar. The back dials were indeed an eclipse predictor and a calendar computer. The machine was real, but they discovered so much more. The CT scans revealed gears that Price had never seen, gears hidden inside other gears, bringing the total confirmed gear count to at least 37. The machine was even more complex than he had realized. They uncovered a sophisticated system to model the variable motion of the moon. The moon doesn't orbit the Earth in a perfect circle. Its path is an ellipse. This means it sometimes moves faster in the sky and sometimes slower. The mechanism's creator modeled this using a brilliant pin-and-slot mechanism with 2 offset gears, which caused the moon's pointer to subtly speed up and slow down, perfectly mimicking its complex celestial dance. This was a detail of such astronomical and mechanical subtlety it was almost unbelievable. And this led to the revelation of the mechanism's most astonishing, mind-bending secret. The ancient Greeks knew that while the sun and moon moved in predictable, if complex, circles, the planets did not. They knew about the 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And they had observed that these planets sometimes appear to slow down in their journey across the night sky, stop, and even move backward for a short period before resuming their forward motion. This is called apparent retrograde motion. We now know it's an illusion caused by the Earth's own faster orbit as we overtake the outer planets, like a faster car on the inside lane of a racetrack, making the slower car appear to go backward for a moment. But for ancient astronomers, working from a geocentric model of the universe where everything was supposed to orbit the Earth, it was a profound and deeply difficult philosophical and mathematical puzzle. How could you possibly model this bizarre, looping, imperfect motion with simple, perfect circular gears? The CT scans revealed the answer. The maker of the Antikythera mechanism had solved this problem with a stroke of pure mechanical genius that is almost beyond belief. For each of the 5 planets, they had created an independent, incredibly complex gear train. And they used a system of epicyclic gearing, or gears on gears. Imagine a large gear turning. On the edge of that gear there's a small pin, and on that pin a second, smaller gear is mounted, which is meshed with another gear at the center. As the large gear turns, it carries the smaller gear around with it, which in turn rotates on its own axis. This is the principle behind epicyclic gears, or epicyclist, very same mathematical concept Greek astronomers like Hipparchus and later Ptolemy used to describe planetary motion. By carefully and brilliantly choosing the size, tooth counts, and offsets of these gears in a nested pin-and-slot system, you can create a pointer that traces not a simple circle, but a complex, looping pattern that perfectly mimics the retrograde motion of the planets. This was the solution to Price's missing planetary gears. It was a physical manifestation of the most advanced astronomical theory of its day. This pin-and-slot mechanism was an idea of such staggering sophistication that nothing like it would appear in the known history of technology for another 1,000 years, finally re-emerging in the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. The creator of this device had not only a deep understanding of Greek astronomical theory, but also the mechanical brilliance to translate that complex theory into a working, miniature, bronze reality. This wasn't just a sun and moon calculator. It was a complete, portable planetarium, a miniature cosmos in a box. But perhaps the most humanizing and intimate discovery came from the surface of the device. The PTM imaging allowed the researchers to finally read the faint inscriptions etched into the metal. It turned out the mechanism was covered in text, thousands of tiny, perfectly formed, 2-millimeter high Greek characters. It was, in effect, a user manual. This manual explained how to use the device and what its various displays meant. It was a stunning revelation, The text on the eclipse dial, for instance, didn't just predict when an eclipse would happen. It also described the expected color and direction of the eclipse: fiery red, or dark, or some other shade. This was a form of astrology or omen reading. It suggests the device wasn't just for pure, dispassionate science. It was also used for divination, a crucial part of ancient Greek and Roman culture, where celestial events were seen as messages from the gods, portents of war or famine or the fate of kings. And then they found something truly unexpected on the back dial, a detail that connected the heavens to the earth in the most wonderful way. Tucked away within the complex Metonic calendar was a smaller, 4-year dial. The inscriptions revealed what it was for. It tracked the cycle of the great Panhellenic Games. These were the 4 major athletic and cultural festivals of the ancient Greek world, held at different sites. The Isthmian Games, the Pythian Games, the Nemean Games, and the most famous of all, the Olympic Games. This little dial would tell you which year in the cycle it was, and which games were coming up next. This single detail completely changed our perception of the mechanism. It wasn't just a high-minded, esoteric tool for a handful of elite astronomers. It was a device that connected the grand clockwork of the cosmos to the rhythms of everyday Greek life. It was a tool that an educated merchant, a nobleman, or a general might carry. A tool to not only track business cycles by the moon, or plan a sea voyage by the stars, but also to know when it was time to travel to Olympia for the games. It was a piece of social and cultural technology, as much as a scientific one. So, the modern analysis painted a complete and astonishing picture. A wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox, with dials on the outside and a complex, beautiful assembly of at least 37 interlocking bronze gears on the inside. You would turn a knob on the side, and on the front, a complex display of pointers would show the positions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets against the zodiac. On the back, elegant spiral dials would predict eclipses for decades to come and tell you the date in multiple calendars, including the all-important athletic games cycle. It was an astonishingly complex, beautiful, and powerful piece of machinery, one of the greatest archaeological wonders ever found. The mystery of what it was had finally been solved. But this solution, as it so often does in these great mysteries, only opened up a new, even more profound set of questions. We now know what the Antikythera mechanism was, but the biggest, most haunting questions remain. Who on earth could have built such a thing? And perhaps more importantly, why is it the only one we have ever found? The inscriptions and the style of the device place its construction somewhere between 150 and 100 BC. The shipwreck it was on, we now know from coin analysis and carbon dating, sank around 65 BC. This suggests the mechanism wasn't a brand new device when it went to the bottom of the sea. It was a prized, perhaps even antique, possession being transported, likely from the Greek East to a wealthy Roman buyer in Italy, perhaps even to Julius Caesar himself, who had a known fascination with astronomy. The search for the creator naturally leads us to the great minds of the era. As we mentioned, the famous Roman orator and philosopher Cicero, writing in the 1st century BC, the very same time the ship sank, actually described 2 such machines. In his work De Republica, he describes a device built by the legendary mathematician, physicist, and inventor Archimedes of Syracuse, who lived a century before the mechanism was made. Cicero said Archimedes had created a bronze sphere that brilliantly modeled the motions of the sun, moon, and 5 planets, and which could even show eclipses. He also described a similar, more recent device built by his friend, the Stoic philosopher and polymath Posidonius of Rhodes, a direct contemporary of the mechanism. Could the Antikythera mechanism be one of these very devices, or one like them? It's a tantalizing, almost romantic possibility. The island of Rhodes, in particular, was the Silicon Valley of its major center for astronomy, engineering, and mechanics. The great astronomer Hipparchus, who is often called the father of astronomy, and is credited with discovering the precession of the equinoxes and developing many of the complex astronomical theories used in the mechanism, worked on Rhodes. It is highly likely that the mechanism was built in a workshop on Rhodes by a master craftsman following the theories laid out by Hipparchus. The text on the device itself provides another clue. The calendar on the game's dial, the names of the months, are not from one of the major centers like Athens or Rhodes itself. Instead, the month names appear to be from a Corinthian dialect, possibly from Corinth itself or one of its colonies in the west, maybe even Syracuse in Sicily, the home of Archimedes. This Corinthian connection is compelling, but not conclusive. The creator remains a ghost, a nameless genius whose brilliance shines out to us from across 2 millennia. But this leads us to the most unsettling question of all. Was this a singular masterpiece, the work of a lone, once-in-a-millennium genius like Archimedes or Leonardo da Vinci? Or was it just a standard piece of high-end equipment? The craftsmanship is superb, but it doesn't have the ostentatious gold and jewels of a unique royal treasure. It's functional. The inscriptions are practical and instructional, not poetic dedications. This suggests that it might not have been a one-off. It could have been one of many produced in a workshop for wealthy, educated buyers across the Hellenistic and Roman worlds. If that's true, then where are the others? Why have we never found even a single fragment of another such device anywhere else in the vast Roman Empire? It seems inconceivable that a technological tradition so advanced could simply vanish without a trace. This is the core of the mystery that makes the Antikythera mechanism such a powerful and profound out-of-place artifact. Its existence implies a lost history, a branch of ancient Greek technological prowess that was completely unknown to us. Forces us to ask, what else could they do? If they could build a clockwork computer to model the heavens, what other sophisticated machines might they have created that are now lost to time? Did they have other geared devices for navigation, for automation, for other purposes we can't even imagine? The common theory, and the most heartbreaking one, is that this technological tradition was incredibly fragile. It was likely highly specialized knowledge, held by only a few masters and passed down directly from master to apprentice in a handful of workshops, perhaps only on Rhodes. When the stability of the Roman Empire began to decline, when wars and plagues swept the land, and later when centers of learning like the Great Library of Alexandria were sacked and destroyed, this precious knowledge may have simply died out. The skills were lost, and the machines themselves, made of valuable bronze, would have been seen as nothing more than a source of raw material. They would have been melted down over the centuries to make swords or coins or cannons. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism only survived because of a tragedy. It survived because it was lost to the one place no one could get to it, the bottom of the sea. It is a message in a bottle, a single miraculous survivor of a forgotten world of genius. This single object fundamentally challenges our smug, modern sense of linear progress. We tend to think of history as a straight, upward climbing line, from primitive to advanced, with us standing proudly at the apex. But the Antikythera mechanism shows us that history is more complex. It has peaks and valleys. There are moments of incredible genius that can be lost, and knowledge that has to be painstakingly rediscovered centuries or even millennia later. It's a humbling and slightly terrifying thought. For over 1,400 years after this device sank beneath the waves, humanity did not possess the technical ability to create anything of its equal. It sits today in its climate-controlled, nitrogen-filled case in the Athens Museum, a silent testament to a level of genius we are still struggling to fully comprehend. It is a ghost from a lost world, its silent gears a profound rebuke to our own historical arrogance. It reminds us that we don't know everything about our past, and that there are still profound mysteries lying in wait, on dusty museum shelves or deep beneath the sea. So what do you think? After hearing the long, incredible story of this piece of ancient technology. What's your take? Do you think it was the work of a singular genius like Archimedes, a unique masterpiece lost to time? Or do you believe it's evidence of a much broader, now vanished technological tradition, implying a whole lost world of ancient machines? What other wonders might still be out there, waiting to be discovered? Let me know your theories and your thoughts about this ultimate out-of-place artifact in the comments below. The story of the Antikythera mechanism is a conversation that bridges millennia, and I'm fascinated to hear your perspective. And if you were captivated by this journey into one of history's greatest archaeological and technological puzzles, please do me a favor and hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell, because you never know what lost worlds or forgotten mysteries we'll be exploring next. Thank you for joining me on this dive into the deep past. Until next time, stay curious.